Welcome everyone to the second event in our Sunday Speaker Series focused on the Jesuit Universal Apostolic Preferences, also known as the UAPs. Last month we heard Father Michael Graham provide us with an overview of the UAPs, and then he took a deeper dive into UAP 1, Showing the Way to God. You can access that if you weren't able to make it. It is on the YouTube channel for St. Xavier Church. Today, we're going to have our second part in the series focusing on UAP 2, Walking with the Excluded. And joining us today are three members of the founding leadership team at Xavier Jesuit Academy. This new faith-based elementary school for boys in grades 3 through 8 will be opening its doors in Bond until this August. So before I introduce our speakers, I'm going to ask Father Jim to lead us in a quick opening prayer.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning, Father.
Let's just put ourselves in the space of the Holy Spirit, and may the Spirit guide the conversation and our hearts today as we learn about this beautiful initiative here in Cincinnati, this new school. So why don't we start in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit.
Amen.
Dear God, as we reflect today on the presentation by three leaders of the new school initiative here in Cincinnati, and on the powerful words of Jesus in Matthew 25, regarding the finding of Jesus and those we serve, we are reminded of our own call to love and serve our neighbors especially in need. We lift up to you, Lord, all those who are hungry, thirsty, strangers, in need of clothing, the sick, and in prison. May your mercy and grace flow through us as we seek to be your hands and feet in the world. Give us the strength and compassion to reach out to others and to be instruments of your love and healing. We ask this through Christ our Lord. Amen. In the Father, Son, Holy Spirit.
Amen.
So again, welcome, and I will let another wonderful co-worker introduce our three speakers. That would be Sister Whitney.
Thank you. Yeah, I just realized I did not introduce myself. So I'm Sister Whitney Shields. I've been at the parish on staff for about 2 months now. I'm the new Associate Director of Social Mission. So today, let me introduce our speakers, Father Nathan Went, Mr. Kyle Chandler, and Mr. Michael Gong from Xavier Jesuit Academy. First up, our founding president is Father Nathan Went. Since his entrance into the Society of Jesus in 2003, Father Went has served extensively at all levels of Jesuit education. Most recently, he served as the Road Through Xavier program coordinator at Xavier University, developing formational experiences and community-engaged learning for undergrads. Prior to that, he was the assistant director of the corporate work study program at Cristo Rey Jesuit High School, Twin Cities, served as the assistant to the president at Creighton Preparatory School, Omaha, and served as chaplain, religion teacher, and formation for mission officer at Jesuit Academy, Omaha. Then we have Mr. Kyle Chandler, the founding principal of XJA. With him, he brings 20 years of experience in Jesuit education to his role as the founding principal. Over the last 13 years, Mr. Chandler served as assistant principal for student affairs at the University of Detroit Jesuit High School and Academy. And prior to that was dean of co-curricular activities and taught middle school and high school English. In his tenure at U of D Jesuit, Mr. Chandler worked to increase the diversity of the school's teachers and staff while collaborating with school leadership to cultivate a more inclusive environment. And last but not least, we have founding teacher, Mr. Michael Gong. Mr. Gong recently served as a secondary science teacher at Dayton Early College Academy in Dayton, Ohio. Prior to that, he worked as a science teacher at Lincoln West School of Global Studies in Cleveland, where he also coached varsity soccer and basketball. In 2012, while completing his undergrad degree at John Carroll University, he co-founded the Carroll Ballers, an organization that empowers youth involved in the juvenile justice system through building positive relationships using the game of basketball and an originally developed mentoring curriculum. So if you would join me in welcoming our speakers.
Fellas, if you want to come up. Thank you for the introduction. We also have with us another staff member from Xavier Jesuit Academy, a very important one, Mr. Xavier, who is our VP of Advancement. Also working in fundraising, ensuring that we have the resources to have our mission. And I work with him closely, so we welcome Greg, who will be helping out a bit with the technology in greeting all of us. Father General of the Society of Jesus has a mission for all of us. And this mission now is articulated and envisioned through the universal apostolic preferences. And Pope Francis noted the importance of the first universal apostolic preference that if you attended the last session by Father Graham, you learned a bit about, and that is showing the way to God through the spiritual exercises and discernment. There's a strong convergence between all of the universal apostolic preferences and what Pope Francis refers to as the current apostolic priorities of the Church at this time. Pope Francis charged Father General with making sure that the primacy of showing the way to God through the spiritual exercises and discernment was always understood as foundational. Our spirituality would not be lost in all of the apostolic works of the Jesuits, of which we partake as the congregation of St. Francis Xavier Church, involvement in the work and ministry of the Church, of the Catholic Church in Cincinnati, in a particular way in our practice of Ignatian spirituality. The UAPs were promulgated by Father General to the whole Society of Jesus on a letter in February of 2019. And they are intended to guide all of the works of the Society of Jesus throughout the world for a decade until 2029. And as a founding president of the newest Jesuit education institution in Cincinnati, among a few opening up throughout the country and around the world, I feel honored that this is happening now amidst the promulgation and enactments of these UAPs as we center them on the work that we do. And Father General makes very clear that the point of the universal apostolic preferences that they're not our preferences. They're not the things that I decide as president of what I prefer to be done. Because often what I prefer to be done probably isn't the best way, or falls apart, or doesn't go according to plan. No, it's God-centered. It's Spirit-centered. It's discernment-centered, following the Holy Spirit. That's why the spiritual exercises and discernment is so central to what we're doing. So I feel honored as president and humbled as president that we are creating this Xavier Jesuit Academy in response to a discernment process, in response to prayer, in response to communal discernment in Cincinnati and in the Midwest province, and also through identifying and listening to the voices of the community, which raises up our second universal apostolic preference, walking with the excluded. Our first universal apostolic preference that is so foundational of the spiritual exercises and discernment, the beginnings of Xavier Jesuit Academy, this idea comes from a collective people of prayer and of the church. It comes through the Archdiocese of Cincinnati. It comes through SLICE. It comes through the Church of the Resurrection, where Xavier Jesuit Academy is located. And it comes through the Society of Jesus. So it involves us all. It's a network of discernment. And the particular discernment for the Society of Jesus and sponsoring the school arose through a prayerful consideration. It arose through identifying the opportunities that God was giving us at this time. A great opportunity comes with a gift, a foundational gift that can be transformative. And then so there's the desire, resources, and then the question is, Spirit, you've given us these gifts. How do we respond in love? How do we respond for your glory? What is the greater good? And that's where more discernment comes. And through listening to voices from the community, from Bond Hill, Roselawn, the neighborhoods surrounding where Jesuit Academy was chosen to be located, these groups were discovering that there was a particular need for educating boys in the community. There's a particular need and concern for their futures and the options in front of them. A particular concern because, as what has happened throughout the Archdiocese, their history, through various ways, schools close. Especially schools close in urban areas where there's changes of population. There's, of course, systematic reasons why that happens. There's wrongs, there's sin, but now there's also hope for bringing Catholic education in a particular way back into this neighborhood to serve them as they are now. So that communal discernment was a big part of why Xavier Jesuit Academy became to be located in this area. And as we're all gathered together in the feasibility study, this campus at St. Agnes was located, then the Society of Jesus was asked, because we have experience with schools for boys, we have experience in these nativity model schools throughout the Midwest and the country, would you be willing to sponsor this? Discern. So that, and then another interior discernment happened within the Society of Jesus, the Midwest province, all the way back to Father General, who promulgated these universal apostolic preferences of, can we take this upon ourselves? How do we respond? And I'm so happy, and it's so hopeful for me that we said yes. That we said yes. When perhaps we look at the church, maybe in our more negative moments, when we see things closing, or we see things merging, or we see the church maybe withdrawing from some places where we might see particular needs to serve, we're saying yes. And even yes to something more difficult, to a difficult road, to a particular way of serving this particular population, this location, we can really change lives deeply. So I'm so glad that the Society of Jesus said yes. And I know for our young people, our Jesuits in formation, this is it's a beacon of hope. It's a beacon of hope. They're so proud that we're saying yes to this particular mission at this time. It says a lot about who we are and what we do. Through the discernment of the school, we found some champions of the mission, some foundational members that have become members of our board of trustees that said, lay people that said yes. So, totally essential. Without them saying yes first, the Society of Jesus would never say yes. Because that's the foundation, is the people, the local people in Cincinnati that make a difference. And those people were Mr. Mike Keating, now the board chair, Mr. Bill Bechtel, and Harry Salmon, who was a great living Cincinnatian. And Harry's a member of the board of SICE, and same with Bill Bechtel, and Mike Keating is a great philanthropist in the city of Cincinnati and respected in the community. Those three guys said yes to this mission. They said yes to the challenge. They discerned among themselves and their family, and it all folded in. So you can see how much our spirituality, our reliance on the Holy Spirit, and finally our trust in that Spirit to take a step forward in this challenging, risky endeavor to bring hope and joy to so many more families and boys here in Cincinnati. I'll bring up Mr. Kyle Chandler. He's our founding principal. I'm very proud of our staff. Mr. Chandler works tirelessly with Think About
You can do
Surrender
that in the
School.
Contacts app.
Yes, we can. Thank you, sir. Yes, we can. All right. So he works tirelessly. He's a wonderful man. I'm so overjoyed to have him leading in such a crucial role in the school. So his Jesuit formation is probably a little more extensive than mine. So he's definitely been all over the world in different places and things. So I'm very happy to have him. So let's see.
I'm going to keep this relatively brief. I'm not going to keep it brief. Hey, I've been losing my voice, and so I don't know if that's God telling me to sit back, be still. But I guess I also take it to say that if you don't laugh at my jokes, then I presume it's either the microphone or because you can hear me. So I'm Kyle Chandler, the founding principal. So this isn't my first time being in this building. Super fortunate. So Greg Bears is a member of this parish. So he invited me a while ago to attend Mass. And I remember the first time he invited me, he was like, well, my family typically goes to 7 a.m. And I said, well, what other options do we have? But he says, no, you should really do it. So I came to a 7 a.m. Mass, and I was really moved. Right? I appreciate it. What I did not know was that was the first Mass that was here since the Restoration. And so I walked in and I said, this sanctuary is unbelievably beautiful. And so I felt so compelled that I went home. So I have 4 kids. And I told my kids, I said, hey, listen, I found this special thing in Cincinnati called the 7 a.m. Mass over at St. Xavier. I said, I think we should give it a shot. And all my kids got real quiet and was eating their food. And my one son, I have 3 boys and 1 girl. My one son says, Daddy, I'm your guy. I'll go with you. And I was like, let's do this. So he came and he was super attentive. Afterwards we ended up going to breakfast. So we went back home and I said, hey, Mateo, tell them about the good news and what you learned today. He was like, there's some great breakfast spots. I said, okay. Because it's true, in Jesuit education, we're taught to meet them where they are. I knew what I was doing when I took the little guy to breakfast. Because he told his brothers, and the next time we came back, his 2 brothers came with us. So they sat through, they enjoyed, and we went to breakfast afterwards. Then they started to ask the question consistently, when are we going back to that 7 a.m. Mass? And so it was a beautiful thing, right? And so you meet them and they learn a little bit along the way, and then you reward them afterwards. So I'm excited to be here for a lot of different reasons. One is that the Jesuit community has remained open to our mission throughout the entirety of this entire process. And so I've loved having conversations with different people. As Nathan mentioned, so I'm from Detroit. I went to a Jesuit high school. I worked at a Jesuit high school straight out of college, and I was there for 19 years. Afterwards, I had a variety of different roles. First was an English teacher, so I'm not sure how many of you all are Catholic school educators here. Okay, okay, everybody. So many of you, for those that have your hands up, if you put your hands back up for me, how many of you all remember diagramming? There we go. Some of you, I think, go to Catholic school with diagramming. So that was my thing. That was my bread and butter. So I was a grammarian in heart, right? Growing up, my mom was very clear on subject-verb agreement. She was very clear on using contractions that existed. The Webster Dictionary was a mainstay in our household. So when I was teaching, we did diagram. Straight lines using your ID, using pencils because you're going to make mistakes. And so I love that, and I love instilling order and discipline. And I use the word discipline on purpose to make people understand that discipline isn't about the old school, right, getting paddled. Discipline is about structure. And so when I first heard about this mission, what I thought about was this idea of being able to come down to Cincinnati and share some of the great experiences, the worthwhile things that I learned growing up, but also the things that I was able to use at UAP Jesuit High School Academy. And so for this first portion, what I'd like to do, can you go to the next slide for me, Greg? This idea of working with the excluded. So during my journeys, I got introduced to Father Pedro Arrupe, who was the Superior General from 1965 until 1983. He's written a number of wonderful pieces, right? And so shortly after becoming Superior General, he got invited in 1973 to the International Congress of Jesuit Alumni in Valencia, right? And I don't know if you know this about Jesuits, but they have a reputation of being tremendous fundraisers. You all have probably never heard that before, never heard of asked to donate to a wonderful cause. And so when he went to this gathering of alumni, super prominent graduates, prominent people in general, they were expected to be patted on the back for the wonderful works that they did, right? And so Father Pedro Arrupe started that conversation, but he then pushed them to say, at your core, are you really doing what God has called you to do? And so with that, he said, I need to understand if you are respecting other people and all persons. I need to understand, are you living simply? I need to understand, are you dismantling the unjust social structures that exist in the world? So can I tell you, like their receptivity to this message, there were a lot of uncomfortable people in that space, but his thing was that he's a very reflective man. It was all about getting down to the core of everything that he's doing. And he wanted to push them to remember that all the blessings that you received in life are not for you, God's greater glory. And so when he walked out of the space, he left them with the idea of love for God that does not result in justice is a farce. And so when I first read that, this is like halfway through my Jesuit experience, I was like, man, didn't he tell them? Like, I'm doing great things as a Jesuit grad. Those guys got to get it together. And then I kind of walked away. Go to the next slide for me, Greg. And I really started to kind of slow down and think about this a little bit. And I got pushed when the universal apostolic preferences came out. And it's this idea of binoculars, windows, and mirrors. And so I did like a lot of people. You know, when someone tells you off, when your parents are yelling at you as a kid, you look at your siblings and go, yeah, didn't they tell you? You need to get your act together. But there was a moment where I tried to ask myself, well, there has to be a greater purpose in that. And so when we hear compelling messages, a lot of us look at things through the lens of a binocular. Right? You see the news, and you think about the world, think about how awful other people are. Other things are going on globally. Some of us get a little bit closer home and we look through things from a mirror. And we say, man, our neighbors really need to get their house together. Things are crazy over there. Their kids are terrible. Or my wife told me the other day, man, their lawn is great. Kyle, what about that's a different conversation for a different time. But many of us never get to that third phase. And this is what I feel like Pedro Rupre was calling those graduates and calling people like me, the Universal Apostolic Preference is the same thing, is what does this look like from my lens? How do I contribute to this notion of walking with the excluded? So I have this phrase called kind of otherizing things. So when I hear about walking in the excluded, it's easier to talk about how other people have wronged me. How have I been treated in the margins, right? For my entire life, I mean, I'm a black man. And so a lot of my journey has been talking about how other people have treated me. But that's a very true narrative. But there are other parts of my life where I have to confront myself and say, how have I treated others? How have I contributed to the joking? How have I treated to the marginalization? How have I pushed other people to the fringe? And so when I really confronted myself with, what are you really doing with your Jesuit mission? If I'm being 100% honest with you, UAP Jesuit High School Academy up in Detroit is a phenomenal school. Been around since 1877. Some of the best and brightest you will encounter in the world. When I thought about this notion of the mirror, I said, the truth is I think a lot of these kids probably would have been great with or without me. So am I pushing myself to that uncomfortable phase to where I'm actually trying to pay it forward to someone who may not benefit from having the presence of a guy like me? And I'm saying that with all humility, right? And so when I thought about that, truthfully, the phone rang several months later, and a very trusted entity says, hey, Kyle, there's an opportunity happening down in Cincinnati for this brand new Jesuit school. The truth is the Jesuits are in the business of opening a lot of schools. But because of your background, your experience, I'd love for you to think about it. And I said, no, absolutely not. I'm from Detroit. I'm born and raised. The Lions are finally starting to do well. I cannot move right before they're about to be successful. And he says, okay, Kyle, just think about it a little bit. And I really sat down and I asked myself, I said, if I'm halfway through my teaching journey, 19 years, have I accomplished what God really wants me to accomplish? I didn't really have an answer. And I said, well, let's at least investigate this option a little bit more. And the more I got to know about the mission of XJA, and this idea of all of my instruction had been 7 through 12. But what I knew was sitting on the admissions committee, there were young men who got to our table who were so ill-equipped from their 6th grade experience that we couldn't even take a risk on them because they were so far off the path. And I said, I think what God was preparing me for was to understand kind of the end goal and to backtrack to help make sure more of these young men have this opportunity. And so the more I started talking about XJA, I met the people that were around the mission, talked about the infrastructure. I realized being able to capture more of these young men in 3rd grade would be a tremendous opportunity, a blessing, and a mission. And this is something that's worth me definitely giving everything that I have. So then the real hard part is how do you commit your life for kids to move down to Cincinnati, right? So I did like I did with church, Kings Island, the Newport Aquarium. Come on now, kids. You didn't know I packed all their bags in the trunk. I didn't do that. We had real conversations. And my wife was super supportive. She said, listen, Kyle, I've been waiting for you to tell us it's time. And God kind of knocked on the door and said, this is it. So we spent the last 2 years pulling many of these pieces together. I'll share more details shortly, but just as far as introductions are concerned, excited because I do feel like this is our attempt to address universal apostolic preference number 2, walking with the excluded, strategically, infrastructure-wise, establishing foundations. So excited to contribute my part to this equation. Video. So we do have a quick video that we're going to share with you guys just to give you a rough idea too of where things stand.
Xavier Jesuit Academy is responding to voices in Bond Hill asking for more high-quality education options, especially for their young men. We're very proud to be welcomed into the Bond Hill community. Xavier Jesuit Academy is very grateful for the Community Makeover Day 2024. We're very grateful for the Cincinnati Reds, Procter & Gamble, and the Cincinnati Zoo and their corporate partners for making Xavier Jesuit Academy an anchor for their Community Makeover Day.
This is year 15 for our Community Makeover project with our partners, and we've yet to work inside of the Bond Hill neighborhood. We're thrilled to be here. For the Reds, it's also literally a mile down Reading Road from our academy. For all of our makeover partners, including P&G, the Cincinnati Zoo, Cincinnati Children's Hospital, GE Aerospace, Kroger, and others, it has all the ingredients of a project that can benefit from our expertise and from the work that we've done in other communities. And it has the Xavier Jesuit Academy, which for us was a calling card. First of all, the Cincinnati Zoo, they're going to install one of our urban learning gardens. We're also working with GE Aerospace. They're going to be the ones helping us to build up the STEM lab. We're working with P&G. They're one of the project leads, and they've taken on this art space. And then Kroger has offered to help out with their commercial kitchen, so bringing in some equipment donations.
A lot of positive changes have taken place here since last time we spoke. We've got the structural steel up for our new entrance, our atrium. The roof goes on starting tomorrow. Inside the building, you're going to see some real changes with the basement and the first floor drywall. And we've got all of our sidewalks completed. All the barricades are in. All of our mechanicals are wrapping up inside, and we're going to start finishing the drywall next week, with hopes that over the next couple of weeks we can have painters in, ceilings, floors, and finishing up on time.
We thank our corporate partners who have seen the dream and read the mission, but they too have this social outreach, and it's just so important for us to be engaged in this overall aspect of how we all give back, individuals and corporately.
That video is part of a 4-part series, which is coming into Maine. That's part number 2. Triversity Construction, who's working on the building, has been creating these videos for us, but that demonstrated, I think, is our investment in the community. Universal Apostolic Preference number 2 highlights the gap between the rich and the poor and how that gap just keeps expanding. We look at what does it take, we ask ourselves, what does it take to provide an education in 2024 that's going to reach the population of students and families that we're welcoming into Xavier Jesuit Academy. And we want to put our best foot forward. We want good things, nice things for people. Why? Because they deserve it. They deserve it. They deserve good things. So we've invested a lot into the building, our infrastructure. Everything's very intentional, which we'll talk about a bit more. The UAP, Walking with the Excluded, also acknowledges that Jesus suffers and Jesus is crucified with his people. So the suffering that comes from the experiences of living in poverty, especially among the little ones, which are the most vulnerable. And Jesus takes the hands of those who are vulnerable and the little ones. And what we've come to learn in our time in Bond Hill and elsewhere, doing lots of community engagement with leaders, with other pastors in the community, with neighbors, is that their hands are out. Everyone's hands are out to take another hand. The welcome has been so wonderful. So when you say, I'm walking with the excluded, no, it's, we're holding hands together, we're walking together. Their hands are outstretched. And you come to know that because of proximity, of being with people, of showing up, of keeping my mouth quiet and listening and learning and hearing their voices and prayerfully responding. People's hands are outstretched. There's so many assets in communities that we can often think, well, they're in despair or there's major problems. No, there's so many assets. And it's recognizing those things, learning about what they are from the people that have them, and asking them, how can we help continue to build this up? Where do you want to go? What are our shared goals? That's how it happens together. We will walk together. And Jesus says to everyone, especially the little ones, come inherit the kingdom. What is that kingdom going to look like for Xavier Jesuit Academy students and their families? What is that kingdom going to look like? That's what we're all going to discover together. And it's a wonderful journey to be with them in that. There's a special focus on education in the UAP number 2, that at all levels of education, people will be aware and hopefully will form people to know that their hearts are burning for reconciliation, that they're burning for reconciliation. And as a Jesuit, and perhaps you're aware, and as Catholics we're aware of our historical sin, how we've been involved in racist practices in the United States. We know these things to be true. How do we acknowledge truth? How do we seek reconciliation and keep walking forward, especially with the people we have purposely excluded? How do we do that? And I'm proud of the Society of Jesus in acknowledging that and taking steps with the people who we have excluded along the way to partner with them towards a hopeful future, a better future for us all, that'll continue to heal everyone. And education is such a big part of that. So another response personally for me is for Xavier Jesuit Academy, I think this is a step of our investment in saying we're serious about reconciliation. We're serious about healing. We're serious about giving and resources. Why? Because people are so deserving. And we're sorry and we apologize for our neglect from the past. And we're doing it because we're responding to the movement of the Holy Spirit. We'll speak a little bit more about the mission of Xavier Jesuit Academy.
Yeah, I mean, if I could piggyback off what Father Wick just said, I think our mission, I remember when I was like my second year at UAP Jesuit, one of my close friends was a Jesuit scholastic. And although I was Jesuit educated, I had the nerve to ask him, I said, so what really makes you all different from the other priests? And not a good way to ask that question. But he says, well, no, Kyle, the reality is that he goes, not to besmirch anybody else's mission. But as a Jesuit, I feel like my calling is to not just feed you for the moment, but to realize why you need it. And so he said, I want to get to the source. I want to better understand the why behind whatever that current circumstance situation may be. And it just had this profound influence on me, right? Is that it's easy to give somebody something for a moment, right? But what is it, if you teach a man to fish, he can sustain and provide for himself. And so our mission at XJA is, again, not to just do things for people, but to do things with people. And I know the key pillar to success at UAP Jesuit, I would venture to say the same thing at St. X, and the same thing at Creighton Prep, and the same thing at Cristo Rey, is the parental involvement. And so it's a matter of how do we engage people in a meaningful way and walk with them in this journey to help them understand. I told you I'm a former English teacher, and this idea of for versus with, when we used to do service trips, when I was a student, we would always come back and we would say, we brought the light of the Lord to this community X. We brought the light of the Lord to community Y. And I'll be honest, I kind of cringe when I think about that some 20 years later. I was well-intentioned as a youth, but the truth is a lot of those communities already had the light of the Lord with them, right? And the truth is too, I was learning God's love as I experienced the journey with them too. Even this last year, I was fortunate enough to travel with the Church of the Resurrection and with the the mission office to go to Ghana. Right? And so we go to Ghana, which is located over in West Africa. And as we go there, right, there were some very challenging situations, undoubtedly. Right? Their economy has been struggling for a number of years. But I have never seen as much joyful praise as I've seen in some of these Catholic churches that I saw over there. The hope, the inspiration, and the excitement. It also pushed me to say, you know what, Kyle, the truth is, you don't always have to be a fixer. I don't know about some of you all, but my wife tells me I've been married for 15 years. Now, I got to slow down and make sure I get the number right, because if I don't, she'll watch the recording and say something. But I've learned through marriage that I have a propensity to be able to fix it. So I go and she's talking to me, and while she's talking to me, instead of listening to understand, I'm listening to solve. Those of you that are married in the room, probably the other husbands in the room have never had that issue before. I'm sure you guys are comprehensive listeners and you understand things at a wonderful level. But when I walked into this work, I had to develop an appreciation for when I go to spaces. My job is not always to solve everybody's problems. My job is to sit there and listen. And so when the mission started, for me, 2 years ago in April, we sat down strategically and listened to community partners to find out how they felt about what was going on. I let them tell me about Bob Hill. I let them tell me about what was going on. I also let them tell me about their experiences at the former St. Agnes Grade School. And they got to explain to me the beginning journey, also the end journey in 1993, and what it was like to have your Catholic grade school close on you when you're in 7th grade, when you're in 6th grade, and you lose something that gave you such a fundamental core. So as I sat through those meetings, we had to decompress and have conversations afterwards to say, how can we bring that life back? I do think there's something very meaningful about the fact that Xavier Jesuit Academy is going into a space in partnership with Church of the Resurrection. And this idea of resurrection and breathing life back into a space that impacted lives since 1929 is too deep. And so for me, what I've learned from this process is this notion of listening to people in a very meaningful way. But also, as we sit down with a lot of our families, our recruitment effort has been everything. We've gone to different community activities throughout our journey. We've gone to trunk or treats, as I told Father Glenn. I think we gave out close to 70 pounds of candy throughout the journey. But that was our process of sharing the good news. A lot of families have expressed a ton of interest, and so we're in the middle of our recruitment process. I want to believe that part of the reason why I'm losing my voice right now is any chance I get to share the good news, I'm going to take advantage of that opportunity. I was literally at my son's baseball game yesterday wearing an XJA sweater, and the family said, "Oh, is that Xavier University?" And I said, "Well, let me tell you a little something about that." And I don't know, now me losing my voice is more saying, "Kyle, slow down just a little bit." But it's been very exciting for us to engage in this meaningful work. And so you see some of the slides going through. I'm gonna end my part on this one slide because it means so much to me. Right, one thing is this idea of grad and grad, which is short for the graduate and graduation. So you start with the end in mind. These are the 5 characteristics that we want our young men to embody upon graduating from the school. And so Mr. Gall, who's going to speak in a moment, helped to coordinate 2 science camps at the Bond Hill Rec Center. So we needed help and support. So we reached out to St. Xavier High School. And so they sent over these wonderful young men. And so as we're about to start our day, you know, we're in the room with all these kids. And these are kids from 5 to probably 13. So they're all over the spectrum. And we're sitting there, and I said, hey, before we get started, we got some St. X volunteers in here. Do any of you all know what St. X is? And one of the adults in the room says, Mr. Chandler, see what you're trying to do, but these kids don't know what St. X is. And I said, well, let's give it a try. And this one young girl raised her hand. And I said, hey, what do you have to say? And she goes, St. Xavier is the school that helps people. And I said, well, tell me more about that. She goes, no, that's the school that sends the student to help us in math class and English class every Wednesday, and they're always there to help us on the playground. And I looked at that adult and I said, you don't know anything. Another kid raised his hand and he goes, that's that school to where they're not really brothers, but they treat each other like brothers all the time. Can I tell you in the background, all those St. X boys' chests started. But I think for me, the thing of beauty was for them to see in a very tangible way, that's where we want our young men to be. We want people to talk about these young men the same way. You know, Nathan's that guy that shows up for me when I really need him. Michael's that guy that's always there when I need to talk to somebody. Like, this is what we want Xavier Jesuit Academy to be, and we're confident that's what we're building. Let's go. So I'm gonna let Michael come up here, because actually I think that's a great segue. I'm glad his mom is here. I know his wife is in the hallway, right? We talk about all those characteristics. So he wouldn't say this about himself. When Michael applied for the job last year, one of my former students reached out to me, and he sent me this text. And he said, Mr. Chandler, he goes, listen, I'm gonna guarantee you, there is not a better man applying for the job. If not for Michael Gall, well, I might get emotional talking about him. He said, if not for Michael Gall, I wouldn't have made it through John Kerry. And I was like, hold on, man. So I picked up the phone and I called him and I said, you gotta tell me a little more. And he goes, you won't find a more selfless person. I've only known Michael for, it hasn't even been a full year yet, but everything that this guy said has been true testimony. Like, Michael's the kind of guy to where I wanted to walk past that piece of trash that I saw on the floor when I was walking up here, and I was like, if Michael was up here, he'd probably pick it up. And we'll be doing things like that, walking somewhere, and I'm going over it, and I'll even walk over it, then Michael will stop, and he'll go back and he'll get it. But it truly has been a pleasure. So Michael is our lead teacher. I'll let him tell a little bit about himself and then jump into some of the slides.
All right, thanks, Kyle, and thanks everybody for being here. Greg, you can hit the next one. So just to give you a little more background, this is new to Cincinnati, but it's actually the 20th school like XJA in the nation. So think about other cities where there's a strong Jesuit presence with a college and high school. Washington, D.C., you've got Georgetown, University, St. Louis, SLU, Omaha, Creighton, Cleveland, John Carroll, Milwaukee, Marquette, Chicago, Loyola. Anyways, so while this is new to Cincinnati, it's something that we are really leaning on the experience, and Father Nathan has had that experience at several of the other Jesuit schools, so Jesuit Nativity schools. So it's something that I've really appreciated, getting to learn from their experience and wisdom. Greg, can you get the next one? So this is, for me, it was an invitation to be a part of a foundation. As the lead teacher, I was thinking I would be doing curriculum, teacher professional development, things like that, and it became so much more. So I put these pictures up on the slide so you can see some of the learning spaces that we've been able to design. So in a very intentional way, listening to the voices of students and teachers who are teaching at these other schools, what has been successful for you in designing classrooms and curriculum that meets those needs of the students that we're working with. Great. So why XJA? So this is where our selling points are for students and families, right? It's an opportunity to have a hands-on learning model with those small class sizes. It's a proven model that's been successful back to the early 70s in New York, where the first Jesuit Nativity School started. Emphasis on the arts, physical activity, and other enrichment programs. So outside of just athletics, what are those STEM, robotics, culinary arts, visual performing arts that we hope to have our students inspired by. And then last but not least is spiritual development, right? I've worked in actually public schools for the last 8 years. So this is something that moving to this school, I was a Catholic school student in Mansfield, Ohio, St. Peter's, went up to John Carroll, and then started working in public schools. But that was always an aspect that I missed being a public school educator, was being able to share in that faith development and formation with students. So in the letter, the UAP letter, this line specifically spoke to me, and I'm going to just leave us with a couple quotes today, and then we'll have time for questions. But in the letter, it's a call to discern who are the most vulnerable and excluded persons in our midst, and to find ways to walk closely beside them. So that's a direct quote from the letter. And as I was reflecting on this quote, and it was kind of mentioned briefly in the intro, but Greg, can you get the next one? It made me think a lot about my time at John Carroll with the Carroll Ballers. So that was a program at the Cuyahoga County Juvenile Detention Center where we would go several times a week working with the youth there and building relationships through the game of basketball. We would always bring a meal. Wasn't the healthiest. It was 40 McDoubles and 40 McChickens, but I knew the people at McDonald's very well, right down the street from John Carroll. So we just had an open account going there. oh, can you go back one more? Sorry, Greg. But this is a population of youth in our society who's really out of sight, out of mind. And there's a lack of relevant, engaging programming. And so my time in the detention center really got me thinking. So I was a biology major at John Carroll. I thought I was going to go into healthcare. But my time at the detention center had me thinking, you know, what is it about the education system, communities that are really letting these kids down? And they're not that far off in age from me. They're not that different. We have similar interests, likes, shared sense of humor. But what is different about this? So that's kind of where my discernment to who are the most vulnerable and excluded kind of led me into, well, let me think about something else that I can do. And I was led into education because of that. Now, next slide, Greg. And so, this is a quote from Tattoos on the Heart. It's by Father Greg Boyle. He's a Jesuit who runs the largest gang intervention program in Los Angeles. And it was something, the program and him is somebody who I really looked up to in college, just with my work at the detention center. But when I think about this idea of, as Kyle mentioned and Father Nathan did, being men and women with others, not the original quote, which is men and women for others, but how do we truly erase the margins in society? And so when our work with XJA, I feel like we have this opportunity to lift up the voices of those at the margins and widen this circle of compassion in the community in Bomb Hill, but also in greater Cincinnati. So that, you know, leads to souls feeling their worth, refusing to forget that we belong to each other. Last slide, Greg. And so bringing this back to XJA, in the curriculum and assessing kind of the needs of the students as we are building the school. We want to make sure that the voices, narratives, interests of our students are represented in our curriculum, in our texts, in imagery around the school, which will lead to that true, authentic ownership of their education. And when students have that ability to truly feel at home, that's when they're going to be most successful. So that goes to us meeting students where they are, not expecting them to fit into this certain box that we have projected for them. And so that's really what we're trying to be intentional about. And the strategies to involve families was kind of already touched on by Kyle, but again, as the lead teacher, it's important for me that we're also working with families in the classroom. So everything that we've picked has ways for families to get involved, whether that's with math, reading, because it's truly a community effort. And yesterday when we were interviewing students and families, you know, one of the mothers told me, you know, one of our questions is, are there other mentors, support systems for the student outside of whoever lives in the home? And she was very honest and said, you know, it truly does take a village. And there's people down the street, there's aunts, uncles, there's the mentor at the church. And so our strategy to involve them is really, I think, our response to this UAP2 and walking with others. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Father Nathan here.
Thank you, Michael. Yes, so we're open to questions, comments from everyone as we've learned. It's a lot, but hopefully inspiring. So, here we are. Yes, sir.
When do you plan to actually start teaching kids? Is it this fall?
In July.
Oh.
Yes. So we have part of the nativity model is an extended school year. So it's about 11-month school year to keep students engaged and families engaged in their education. So we're very grateful for Xavier University, who's going to welcome us on their campus for 2 weeks for our Summer Institute in late July. And that will be a time where we can be together, start building brotherhood, building school culture, assess where our students are, get pretty deep into the data. So we're ready, and our teachers are ready when we're on site in our building to try to engage as much as possible with where they are to begin our more forward towards our academic goals and our formational goals with our students. So we'll start in August on the campus. And that summer programming also, this is a step towards a more robust summer programming, which will come into being. So I got my eyes kind of steering towards what might this look like 5 years in advance? What kind of strategic partnerships will we need to make in order to make a really robust summer and longer experience for our students at all of our grade levels. So that's important. And also with that is an extended day. So our days are longer. From 7:30 breakfast until 4:30, 5 o'clock, and engaging our students, which really opens up the day so we can ensure that we're touching on our subject areas more often, that there is more room for physical activity, hands-on education, experiential learning, which takes more time in the classroom, that our teachers are able to have professional development time, break time. That's really important to what we're about, and that can also benefit families who aren't always readily available at 2:30 and 2:45 to care for young ones in the home. So we'll be able to engage it that way, or they have to pay for after-school care and other things, which can be very costly and logistically complicated. So that's part of the model that we're building, and we also have a graduate support office. So as soon as our families are in the door, we're always engaging them on their walk towards what their future is going to be and trying to help them open those doors. So we'll be engaging with our middle schoolers about thinking about high school. What are good options? Where are you? What fits? We'll know the admissions people at the college prep high schools in the city, the best high schools in the city, and introducing families, and also trying to help them find what are potential barriers to getting into these high schools, remaining at the high schools, and graduating, and walking with them along that way to ensure that if there's great resources at that high school, and they're there, that's great. But there still could be barriers for you accessing those things, knowing about them, engaging them for various reasons. So it's always good to have another person in support helping you navigate those things, encouraging you along the way. And that goes through high school graduation, college, all the way until our graduates no longer engage with us. Nativity schools across the country, great alumni base. It's amazing. Think about it. You're in grade school, guys come back, students come back. They work at the schools. They want to be part of it because they were with them through their whole life journey, no matter where it took them. No matter where it took them, they'll stick with them. So that's an important part of the model. Thank you. Yes?
So one of the things I do all but I have to ask, what about the girls?
Well, if any congregations of women, where's Sister Whitney? Started a sister school, we're more than open to that. So, yeah, so again, we're responding to particular voices in the community that express a particular concern for the options for their young men, what they were seeing in their lives, in their neighborhoods, and what the options are. So that's our response, and kind of bringing our background and historical success around that to bear here. So that was a part of it. Yes, thank you. No.
In the Archdiocese, there's a union of about 10 schools that are deep schools that they get at the Archdiocese.
That's correct.
The one in particular, familiar with the St. Cecilia's School, and they are very, very well balanced. 8 to 8, they're about 1/3 African American, 1/3 Spanish, and 1/3.
Yes, I'm familiar with it. Yes.
Yeah, anyway, that's well balanced curriculums and well balanced student body. I've seen that, but I just wondered if you have any connection.
So SICE, as I mentioned at the beginning, those schools that you're talking about, they're a founding partner in what became Jesuit Academy, because they had ideas of, one, where is there a neighborhood that doesn't have a Catholic school? Bond Hill. We closed it. The Archdiocese closed it in '93. It was predominantly African American when they closed it. And that community suffered because of that. And there still hurts. And then where is there a school? Where is there a community experiencing some generational poverty? And where is the place where there are young people, students of the grade level. So that was the engagement from them, and they began the feasibility study. And when they continued to go and discovered that there's a particular mission here, a particular need around the boys, that's when the Jesuits were called to the table to consider whether we would sponsor this school. And so when we said yes, it became a Jesuit school like St. Xavier High School and Xavier University, our sponsorship. So, and SICE has been really wonderful partners because Kyle and Michael have been welcome to attend a lot of their formational activities for their principals and teachers. The Catholic Schools Office, the Archdiocese, has been awesome in helping us with navigating through the resources that are available for schools, helping us hit deadlines, all that kind of stuff. So we're very grateful for their partnership, and we hope that our students, vast majority of the students that are applying to Xavier Jesuit Academy are coming from public schools. Those are the students that we really want to welcome overall. There's some students that are in Catholic schools that are interested, but those public school students are the ones that are right now for the families that are really attracted to what we're doing, and that's great because that's where our efforts have been focused around recruitment. It's difficult to do, but it's happening, so we're proud of that. Thanks. Yes, sir.
Father Nathan, you have a great partnership you've developed in Bond Hill. Are you going to be accepting students from other parts of the greater Cincinnati
Yes, so
area?
any student, that's a boy at the grade level, so rising third, fourth, or fifth grader can apply. Yeah. So, and we work with families directly in our initial application intake to learn a bit more about them, kind of get a sense of, do they kind of fit the profile of what the mission is about, and then we further engage them up until having interviews. So as Kyle expresses continually to families, like, this has to be a good fit, and as Michael was expressing, this is a partnership effort with families, so you gotta want it. We might want you, but you gotta want it too, right? And that's how this is gonna work. So we're very intentional with our recruitment strategies, with our admissions process, so we get to know the families. We're new. Again, a lot of students coming from public schools, they don't have experience at Catholic school, private school. They don't know what this is about. So this is a risk for them, that we're new. What is this Jesuit stuff? Catholic school, different impressions in the community about what Catholics are about out there. All of that, we have to navigate. But that takes building trust. It takes time, which takes effort, and showing up, and continually communicating, being available for families. So we have a little video here. So this young man, you want to introduce it?
If we can get those last two questions, then we can end on this video, that'd be great.
This is not a question, it's a comment. Thank you for doing this. The church from the beginning has had a unique ability to make things happen. And this is another example of it. This is all good. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
I'll share with Father Webb. So Father Carl Kaiser, who is the provincial and oversees all the Jesuit works in the Midwest, he was the president of UAP Jesuit, so I've known him for a long time. And there was a crucial point where they were closing a lot of Catholic grade schools in inner city Detroit, and it was because the population wasn't Catholic. And I remember we sat down one day over coffee, and he goes, Kyle, I think people need to understand that we don't do what we do because they're Catholic, we do it because we are. Right? And getting to the fundamental core of what it means to actually have your faith in action really compels us. There's one back there.
So I echo John's comments. Thank you for what you're doing. My question is more is the long-term economic sustainability of something like this. So if I listen to your numbers, your target would be 90 to 100 students if you continue out the way you want it to continue out. And I know listening to the SICE schools that have closed, when they get to that 150, 125 or less number, there's concerns. So how does your target, first of all, I don't know how big that school is, what would the enrollment size be capped at? And B, how does that compare to the other 20 similar Jesuit elementary schools that you mentioned? Is it competitive in size? Is it smaller?
Our model is very comparable to the other Jesuit activity model schools, being about 15, maybe pushing up to 20 in some respects, but even having classrooms that are capped at 20. is well below the national average. From a sustainability standpoint, financially, I'll let Father Went articulate this better than I can, but most of the regions in which those schools exist actually don't have things like Ed-Choice scholarship, or they don't have administrative cost recovery. So one thing I learned when I moved down here to Ohio is Ohio actually does a really good job of supporting students regardless of what school they attend, public, charter, or private. And so the fact that we can avail ourselves to the Ed-Choice scholarship helps to reduce that distance. But there is a gap that exists 100%. And the reason why we're able to do what we do is because that gap has been reduced significantly because of the generous donors. And so being in a city that has a Jesuit presence since 1831, it means a lot because people keep on reflecting on their prior experience, and because of that, they think outside themselves and they pay it forward toward other people. And so you're right, our model is sustainable as long as people continue to pour into who we are. And the larger we get, right, we incur the most expenses in the first couple of years, right? But as we add on more grade levels, truly, things begin to balance out a little bit. Yeah, I was going to get you in the last one.
Yeah, thanks. Again, echo the comments, great, very exciting, appreciate what you're doing. Apart from, or in addition to financial, what does help look like for you guys?
I always start with prayers, and I don't say that flippantly, right? I believe people praying for us. This is a mission. This is not a job. This is a calling. The people that do it the best are doing it because they're compelled for bigger and greater purposes. The other thing is I would say moments like this. So you all just sat here and heard the good news of Xavier Jesuit Academy, and as you go out there and share the good news of what we're doing, that helps and supports us too. Because they're strategic partners that we've been bringing to the table throughout the whole process. So we had to pay for every single service that we're going to receive. You're right, it wouldn't be sustainable. But they're strategic partners that come to the table and say, you know what? I'm a big art fan. Let me connect you with this art program that's willing to come into the school and help provide robust instruction and materials. We talk about the Reds Community Fund. I mean, we're not just doing this alone, but you have the Reds, you have P&G, you have Kroger, you Cincinnati Children's. Like those partnerships help a lot, and if you want to volunteer, right? If you have time, space, capacity, and interest, and patience, let me be clear. Working with young people requires a lot of patience. So if you know that that's not the season of your life that you're in, where you're patient with people, then you know what? Volunteering to tutor may not be the top option, but on our webpage, there's an interest form that says, I want to volunteer. That's very helpful to us, because it can be helpful in a lot of ways. If you don't want to tutor, maybe you want to be on the playground some days to help to make sure the kids are engaged, also to be eyes outside. And eyes not just from a safety standpoint, but eyes to say, you know, I keep on looking over there, and Greg seems to be sitting by himself quite a bit. Like maybe we need to make sure we pour into him and make sure he knows that there's somebody here that cares about him. So volunteers in those parts. Other. And just wanted to end on this note, right? So what we've been doing is these last couple of weeks, and this is a brainchild of Mr. Mike Gum, is we've been going out and hand delivering each acceptance letters. And so I know, right? It's been such a beautiful thing. And if you follow us on social media, you may have seen some of these, but this was actually our first delivery. And so I just want you guys to see this. And so I think these are moments when we've been working in the office for 2 years, and for those of us that are educators, right, you start to get that itch because you want to be around kids. This moment right here was life-giving. Will you be your official acceptance of the Xavier Academy? First. Wow.
Maybe a boy.
Wow. Hey, so I think this idea of person, and you can be a part of that, right? Like that's the affirming moment for you, just as a person, right? Purpose, living a purpose-driven life. So again, we just want to thank you all for being here with us, for your prayers and for your support. And I just hope that you all get to enjoy the rest of this beautiful sunny day in Cincinnati.
Yeah, thank you so much to all of you for coming. Thank you to our speakers again. Just a note, St. Xavier Church is in the process of updating their website right now. There will be a link under our service opportunities to Xavier Jesuit Academy with more information on how you can get involved there. Of course, you're welcome to reach out directly. Just a couple quick announcements. One, stay tuned for more information for the next 2 installments in this series where we'll be learning more about UAP 3 and 4 later this year. And then finally, all St. Xavier parishioners are encouraged to complete a social mission survey to provide input on how we can further develop and expand our parish outreach and better live into our call toward inward reflection, outward action. So there are some paper copies available on the table out in the hall. You can take those with you, return them to boxes in the church later. There's also a QR code on the table. There will be a QR code in the bulletin next week, and there's a link in the St. X newsflash. So a lot of different ways you can fill that out over the next couple weeks. And everyone's input is wanted and needed. And just again, thank you and have a great week.